periods, and in fact, Dickens' contribution is very important in the field of English novel because he is considered as the father of English social novels. Okay, and when some laws were made in the parliament, Dickens' novels were considered when they were preparing some laws related to child labor, prison, corruption, the system related prison, education. So that is why he is considered as one of the important writer in the history of English literature. And as I've told you that it is a debatable question that whether this age should be known as uh, age of Dickens, age of Browning, or age of Tennyson. But now we know that it is sometimes known as age of Tennyson, and of course, in the field of novel, you have Dickens, who is considered the prominent figure of this period. Yesterday, we have talked about some writers and their important works. The focus was on Browning and other poets like Matthew Arnold. Now, let us focus on particularly, yeah, uh, important writers. Before that, let us focus on the Victorian genres in the field of prose. Yes. First thing is that novel was the predominant genre of the Victorian period. In fact, you have the decline of drama in this period. There is no focus on drama. You have novel, which is considered as a pocket theater in this period because you can carry novel, you can read. Sometimes what happens, you have uh, in the American literature, you have novella, which you can read in one or two sitting. But in the case of Victorian period, you have most of the novels are very long, long in the sense lengthwise, and there are so many characters because you have to remember that in this period, most of the writers are writing in a periodical. You can say they're writing in a magazine. Sometimes they're writing the episodes which generally comes in newspaper. So that is why most of the novels are very long. In Dickens' case, you can find every novel contains more than 250 pages, and there are so many characters in his novels. That is why it is very difficult to read and focus only on one character. Of course, there are some novels which are considered as the masterpiece when we are talking about Dickens or Hardy, or you can say William Makepeace Thackeray or George Eliot. Now, autobiographies, this is a new genre which developed in this period. Dickens or David Copperfield is considered as his autobiographical novel. Then you have melodrama, then satire and comic operas also become a dominant genre in this period. And the other development in the field of prose is the essay. You have John Ruskin, you have we have already discussed Charles Lamb in the Romantic period, who is known for his essay of Elia and the last essays of Elia. You have William Hazlitt, who contributed in the field of essay in the Romantic period as well as in Victorian period. His roundtables, the collection of essays, is very famous. And this genre is further developed in this period called Victorian Age. And you have Matthew Arnold, who particularly, yeah, of course, you have John Dryden and Sir Philip Sidney, Alexander Pope, P.B. Shelley, who wrote some critical works. For example, you have Sir Philip Sidney's An Apology for Poetry, Dryden's An Essay of Dramatic Poesy, then Essay on Man by Pope, and P.B. Shelley's, that is the Defense of Poetry. But among this work, only Dryden's work, An Essay of Dramatic Poesy, that is considered as the original work. Otherwise, most of the critical works of earlier times are imitation of Aristotle Aristotle's Poetics, Horace Ars Poetica. Uh, then you have in this period, you have criticism which can be found in the works of Matthew Arnold. As I told you, he is primarily a poet, a professor of poetry at Oxford University, but he is very famous for his criticism and his cultural work, that is Culture and Anarchy. So you have art and literary criticism in this period. Then you have, particularly in the Victorian novel, you can find the concept of poetic justice, love and luck win in the end. Particularly, there is a difficult lives portrayed by the writers. Hardworking characters are found in the novels of Dickens and other writers. Then you have realism and naturalism. Remember that these are the two terms which looks like similar, but there is a difference. Realism and naturalism both particularly shows reality, but realism is, you can say, whatever the writer sees, that is described in the novel. For example, if you study some of the works of GB Shaw, for example, let us take the example of Mrs. Warren's profession. You have Mrs. Warren, who is a prostitute. So, if we discuss, means the writer is discussing about the prostitute and her role in the society, that is called realism. But writer is not, in the case of this drama, GB Shaw is more interested why she turned into this profession, prostitution. So he seeks out the reasons, and particularly he gives us some clues that because of some reason she involved in this profession, which was not her choice. So that is called naturalism. Naturalism is more scientific way, and it also shows reality, but it shows the reasons behind that also. For example, Dickens is portraying the characters, most of the characters in his novel, the boys are orphan and they are involved in child labor. So if he is talking about this child labor, then that is realism. But if he says that this was the trend because of Victorian characteristic, because of industrial revolution, and there was a need of in the children, particularly to clean chimney sweepers, and that is why you have you have some children who are portrayed as a labor. And as I've told you, Dickens' novel considered when the British Parliament was making some laws. So that is naturalism, and it is more scientific attitude towards this society. It also presents the reality, but it seeks out to find out the reasons and find out the solution also. So in this period, you have this characteristic realism and naturalism. Then sometime you found skepticism and pessimism, particularly in the novels of. You can find pessimism in the novels of Thomas Hardy, and there is some kind of hope in the novels of George Eliot. Then you have most of the novels were serialized, and that is why they were popular, and that is the reason that most of the novels are lengthy. Then you have one particularly genre developed in the fiction, that is detective fiction. Detective fiction means જે છે તમારી જોડે સસ્પેન્સ સ્ટોરી હોય અને ડિટેક્ટિવ જે છે એ એંગલથી એનું સ્ટડી કરવામાં આવતું હોય. You have some prominent names in this genre, that is Wilkie Collins, Arthur Conan Doyle is one of the important name, Bram Stoker. These are the writers who are writing detective and sensational novels. Then some novels, as we have discussed, Romantic Age, where you have one writer, that is Walter Scott, who is generally famous for his historical novels. And there are some writers like Lewis Carroll, M. Ballantyne, R.L. Stevenson, Thomas Hughes, Rudyard Kipling. These are the important names. Those who are writing for the children. For example, you have Kipling's Jungle Story, then Lewis Carroll, who is famous for particularly two novels which are focused on children. Then R.L. Stevenson, one of the important names in the field of short story of this period. So you can find the variety in the genre or in the fiction of this period. Then this is utilitarianism. This is one of the major trends and movements of this period. We have already talked about that. It means Bahujan Hitai, Bahujan Sukhai. Whatever you want to do, you are free to do. Exercise, you are free to exercise that thing in the society. And particularly, the focus is on the advantage of the, uh, you can say, the uh, particularly advantage to the most part of the society, that is especially kept in the mind. Then you have Oxford movement, which I have told you that you have Henry Newman, John Cable, who are related to this movement, and their main aim was to establish the religious faith and establish the faith of young generation into religion, particularly in the Catholic Church. Darwinism, that is the influence of Darwin, the theory of evolution. Positivism, particularly focus on the reason and logic and the scientific quest in the knowledge. And then you have aestheticism, which I have discussed yesterday. Silver folk fiction and Newgate fiction. These are the two fiction which are popular in this period, where the focus is on particularly Newgate is one of the name of prison in London. What happens that you have the migration from village to city, and cities were becoming large, and you have so many crimes generally happens in the city, and the London jails were full of criminals, and that is why in this period what happens, uh, those people who have committed some kind of you can say not serious crimes, they are punished, but they generally they are punished by the government. They have to live in exile. For example, ઓસ્ટ્રેલિયા જે છે એની સ્થાપના થઈ તો એમાં મુખ્ય કારણ એ જ છે કે બ્રિટિશ જે છે એ બ્રિટિશ સિટીઝન જ મોસ્ટ ઓફલી જે છે ઓસ્ટ્રેલિયાના સિટીઝન છે, પણ એમને જે છે સજાના ભાગરૂપે ઓસ્ટ્રેલિયા જે છે મૂકવામાં આવ્યા હોય અને એવું કહેવામાં આવ્યું કે પાછા તમે આવતા નહીં. That is reflected in Dickens' novel. For example, you have Great Expectation, where you have Abel Beach. Okay, so ultimately, Australia is a nation which you can say nation of criminals, and the forefathers of Australia, you can say that most of the forefathers of Australian citizens are criminals. Uh, in the context of Victorian age. Okay, then you have Newgate fiction that is particularly focused on prison. Dickens talks about the corruption in the prison system and the other faults of prison system in his novels. That is known as Newgate fiction. So these are the terms which I have explained you. In fact, utilitarianism, that is a term first discussed by Epicurus, one of the Greek philosopher, but specifically you can give the credit to Jeremy Bentham for this idea in a Victorian period. Okay, then you have one of the proponent of this theory is James Mill, who is one of the you can say significant philosopher of this period, who is famous for his work on education. In fact, the idea of university, that is one of the famous work by John Stuart Mill, who was one of the proponent, who was one of the supporter of this philosophy. Then there is the greatest good principle. Utilitarian philosophy works on the greatest good principle. Uh, Bentham believed that happiness or to be pleasure is one of the important thing. In fact, J.S. Mill wrote one short work that is utilitarianism in 1863. The theory was given by Jeremy Bentham, that is asked in the exam. This text was written by J.S. Mill, John Stuart Mill. Now let me give you a simple example that જે છે સપોઝ કે તમારી જોડે ટ્રેન જે છે જઈ રહી હોય અને તમારી સામે કોઈ વ્યક્તિ એક વ્યક્તિ જે છે એ સામે આવી રહ્યો હોય ટ્રેનમાં સપોઝ કે આપણે માની લઈએ 50 કે 100 વ્યક્તિ છે. હવે યુટિલિટેરિયન ફિલોસોફી જે છે એ એવું કહેશે કે જો એક વ્યક્તિને મારવાથી 50 વ્યક્તિનો જીવ બચતો હોય તો દેટ ઇઝ અ ગુડ થિંગ મીન્સ ધી ગ્રેટેસ્ટ ગુડ પ્રિન્સિપલ. મતલબ કે એકનું નુકસાન થવાથી જો 50 કે 100 જણાને ફાયદો થતો હોય મતલબ કે સોસાયટીનો જે મોટો ભાગ છે એને ફાયદો થઈ રહ્યો હોય તો એમાં કંઈ ખોટું નથી એ સામેવાળા વ્યક્તિને મારી દેવામાં. But you have on the other side that are pure philosophers who believes in pure reason, like you have Kant, who is famous for his book called The Pure Reason. Then you have particularly Mahatma Gandhi, where they focus that action is also important when you are particularly talking about the result also. મતલબ કે કોઈ પણ જે છે રિઝલ્ટ કરતાં મહત્વની વસ્તુ છે કે એક્શન જે છે એ પ્રોસેસ કઈ રીતે થઈ સોસાયટીને ફાયદો થઈ શકે છે બટ બની શકે છે. જસ્ટ અ મિનિટ. હા હા ક્લાસ ચાલુ છે. આ તો ચાલુ ક્લાસ ફોન કરું પછી. યસ. Yes, I was talking about Kant and Gandhi. So they believe that કે કોઈ પણ એક્શન જે છે એની પાછળ જે છે એનું રિઝલ્ટ તો મહત્વનું છે જ બટ એની જે છે રિઝલ્ટ માટેની જે છે તૈયારી અથવા તો એમાં જે પ્રોસેસ થતી હોય પ્રોસેસ પણ પ્યોર હોવી જોઈએ. બરાબર. You have Dostoevsky's novel Crime and Punishment, where you can find these reasons. Ultimately, you can find that the lady who was killed by the hero Raskolnikov, that is good for the society. In fact, there are some reasons given by Dostoevsky. Ke, uh, he is serving the society by killing that lady pawnbroker. Okay, but the pure philosophers, or you can say the people who believe in pure reasons, they do not justify the murder. That is one of the idea which was very popular during this period, that is utilitarianism, and that is reflected in the novels Dickens and Thomas Carlyle. These are the two important critiques of this philosophy. In fact, you have Hard Times written by Dickens that is dedicated to Thomas Carlyle, which talks about the negative impact of utilitarianism on the society. Okay, we will talk about that novel when we will discuss Dickens' important work. Then you have after this greatest good principle, you have J.S. Mill. Remember that he is famous for one work on liberty, utilitarianism, the subjection of woman. That is very important. That is asked in the exam. What is poetry on social freedom? This is one of the important writer of this period who is generally ignored in the history because most of the works are very short, but these works are very powerful when you are reading these works like on liberty, utilitarianism, the subjection of woman, on social freedom, and in fact he is one of the prominent name in the Oxford movement. So you have to remember this work, and you have to particularly that the subjection of woman on liberty that is asked in the exam. Then you have some critics, as I've told you, Dickens and Carlyle were one of the writers. The Sign of the Time, that is work written by Carlyle, which particularly criticized the utilitarian belief that happiness depends on external circumstances. That another novel that is Hard Times, which also talks about the negative impact of utilitarianism on the society. Then you have Oxford movement, that is a religious movement. It does not have nothing to it does not have anything to do with Oxford University. Yes, it particularly it is a religious movement, and it talks about the members of this movement are related to Oxford University. That is why it is known as Oxford movement. The main aim of this Oxford movement is to reform Anglican Church. They have to particularly prove that Church of England was a direct descendant of the church established by the apostles. Then Anglican Church is also a branch of Catholic Church. Okay, and this is also known as Tractarian movement because tracts of the times, that is a general related to this movement, Oxford movement. J.S. Mills was the editor of this journal. This is asked in the exam, very important, and the Tractarian movement and Tracts for the Times. That is a journal which was published during 1833 to 1841, which is generally asked in the NET exam, and Tractarian movement is also asked in GSET exam. Another name related to this movement is Cardinal Newman. After J.S. Mill, you have Cardinal Newman. Uh, I think I've told you the idea of university that is written by J.S. Mill. That is my mistake. Correct it. It is written by Cardinal Newman. Idea of university. This is one of the important work of Cardinal Newman, and generally this is asked in the exam, where he is talking about the universal idea of university. What is the meaning of university, what should be the focus of university, and what is the role of university in this society. That is discussed in a lecture series. Okay, then he wrote one popular hymn, and the title of the hymn is Lead Kindly Light. Okay, and he wrote one autobiography, that is Apologia Pro Vita Sua. Apologia Pro Vita Sua. And Cardinal Newman is particularly famous for another work, that is Grammar of Assent. Grammar of Assent. Okay. Uh, the idea of university is generally asked, and the autobiographical work, that is Apologia Pro Vita Sua, that is also asked in the exam. Another influence in this period is Charles Darwin, who is a prominent name in this period, who particularly published Origin of Species in 1859. The year is asked in the exam so many times in GSET particularly. Another work, that is Descent of Man, which was published in 1871. And in Origin of Species, we have already discussed when we talked about the characteristic of the Victorian age. At the time, I have explained you that he had given this theory of evolution. The focus is on survival of the fittest, that is the phrase of this book, and the focus is on particularly the natural selection of species. And you know that survival of the fittest among the fittest will survive on the earth. You can take the example of corona. They say you have to change your lifestyle, you have to change your habits to adjust with this COVID period. So those who are not able to adjust themselves, they suffered, and or you can say they did not survive in this period. So uh, according to Darwin, that man is an animal, but it is a social animal, and whenever we faces some kind of problems, as a human being we unite. For example, we have so many problems in the world. When we have COVID, at the time what happens, we show some kind of unity in the sense most of the nations are particularly interested in developing the COVID vaccine. So that is how this work is very important in the history of English literature. In fact, this is considered as one of the landmark year in the history of English literature, that is 1859. That is the publication of Origin of Species. Then you have another work, that is The Descent of Man. Okay, the title is important. It was published in 1871. Then Darwin is the one of the writers who particularly influenced so many writers. You have another writer, Thomas Henry Huxley, who is the scientist, and in fact this is one of the writer who is the uncle of one of the modern novelist, Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave the New World. Okay, uh, you can find the elements of influence of Darwin in literature. Tennyson's In Memoriam. In Memoriam was published in 1850, and remember that you have this work that is published in 1859. But as I've told you, that the conflict between science and religion, in fact, because of industrial revolution, you have particularly this question arise in the mind of people, that whether we should believe in science or whether we should believe in religious. Then you have Dover Beach, which we discussed yesterday by Arnold. That is one of the poem which reflects the mood of entire nation of a Victorian period. Then you have George Eliot's Middlemarch, which is one of the prominent novel which is influenced by Darwin's work, The Origin of Species. Hardy Space and Jude of the Obscure also, you can say, that influenced by this Darwinism. Then you have positivism, that is a term developed by French philosopher Auguste Comte. Remember this name, Auguste Comte, who has given this term positivism. It is asked in the exam. This is a form of empiricism. Empiricism means knowledge, and here the focus is that every rational assertion can be scientifically verified. So you can say that you can say that particularly the focus is on science, reason, and knowledge, logical knowledge. And you have J.S. Mill, Herbert Spencer, George Henry Lewis. We have already talked about J.S. Mill. Herbert Spencer is another scientist of this period. George Henry Lewis is also one of the another scientist of this period. You have aestheticism, which is particularly known as art for art's sake, and the focus is on particularly that the primary aim of literature is to provide pleasure, sublime joy. You have some major proponents of this this movement, that is Walter Pater, who is famous for his book called The Renaissance, that is repeatedly asked in the exam. Walter Pater, where he said that style is a man. જેમ કે આપણી જોડે સંસ્કૃતમાં એક થિયરી છે રીતિ, બરાબર. તો રીતિ જે છે એ થિયરીના પ્રોપોનન્ટ છે સંસ્કૃતમાં વામન. તો એ જે છે ઇંગ્લિશમાં કોઈએ વાત કરી હોય સ્ટાઇલ ઇઝ અ મેન, એ જે છે વોલ્ટર પેટરે વાત કરી છે. વેન વી વિલ ટોક અબાઉટ ક્રિટિસિઝમ, that time you will know about this thing. Oscar Wilde and A.C. Swinburne, one of the prominent name in the PRB movement. Then you have particularly જે છે તમારી જોડે એક સોશિયલ નોવેલ જે છે એને કન્ડિશન ઓફ ઇંગ્લેન્ડ નોવેલ કહેવામાં આવે છે, જેમાં તમારી જોડે ઇંગ્લેન્ડની જે છે કન્ડિશન અથવા તો જે સોશિયલ કન્ડિશન છે એની વાત કરવામાં આવેલી છે. સોશિયલ કન્ડિશનમાં તમારી જોડે એક તો ચાઇલ્ડ લેબર, પ્રિઝન જે છે, કરપ્શન સિસ્ટમ એમાં જે છે એ, બીજું છે પોવર્ટી, એજ્યુકેશન સિસ્ટમ, એની જે છે ચર્ચા આ બધી જે નોવેલ છે એમાં કરવામાં આવી છે. દેટ ઇઝ નોન એઝ કન્ડિશન ઓફ English, or you can say England, and these are the novels known as the social novels. એના એક્ઝામ્પલ છે તો સૌથી ફેમસ એક્ઝામ્પલ છે તમારી જોડે બેન્જામિન ડિઝરાયલનું ધ ટુ નેશન, સિબિલ ધ ટુ નેશન. ચાર્લ્સ ડિકનનું હાર્ડ ટાઈમ, શેર્લોક બ્રોન્ટે કરીને રાઇટર છે જેમનું વર્ક છે સિરલે. ચાર્લ્સ કિંગલે એટ અ લોક, Taylor and a poet, that is an autobiographical work. And another work which talks about the condition of poor people, working class, that is Francis Trollope, Michael Armstrong, The Factory Boy. Okay, most of the novels discuss this theme: poverty, the condition of working class, the social reality of England that is reflected in this novel. Then you have particularly જે છે નોવેલમાં એક બીજો પ્રશ્ન છે, that is the woman question. Women question જે છે particularly talks about the important questions related to woman, and that is the term the new woman. Okay, and new woman જે છે એમાં particularly you have in this period woman you can say that they are writing, and most of the writers, for example you have Bronte sister in Victorian period, then George Eliot, that is pseudonym. George Eliot is particularly, the original name is Marianne Evans, and you know that most of the novels by Bronte sister is also written under the pseudonym. So at the time, you can say the woman's writing is considered inferior, but these women, they are writing, and they are starting, they are, you can say, raising these burning questions related to women, and that is particularly known as woman question. And you have some works like Oliver, Olive Skinner, that is the story of an African farm. Then George Meredith, one of the famous novel, that is Dinah of the Crossway. H.G. Wells, who is generally considered as the father of science fiction, whose novel is famous, that is Anne Veronia, which discusses the problems of women. Then you have modern writer and playwriter, that is G.B. Shaw, and his work Saint John. For this work, he got a Nobel Prize in 1925. Then you have some novels of Benjamin Disraeli, The Two Nations, that is famous, which is considered as silver pop fiction. Now, you have Newgate novel, most of the novels of Dickens like Oliver Twist, A Tale of Two Cities, Banbury Rudge, Great Expectation, where you have the discussion of the prison in his novel. Benjamin Disraeli જે છે મેં તમને કીધું, he was only, this is one of the writer who was also Prime Minister of England, and he is the only Prime Minister who was Jewish, and that is why we have to focus, and we have to focus, particularly remember the important work, that is Sibyl the Two Nations. Sibyl the Two Nations, that is asked in the exam. Another work, that is Tancred. And Endymion. Endymion is one of the play written by George Peele in the Renaissance period. Endymion is also title of John Keats' poem, which is unfinished, and this is a novel written by Benjamin Disraeli, and the title is Endymion. Remember that. And in fact, he is famous for one trilogy where you have Vivian Grey, Conterini Fleming, Elroy, and he was a prime minister once upon a time in Britain, only Jewish prime minister in the history of England till now. One of the lady writers, that is Elizabethan Gaskell, who published particularly A Tale of Manchester Life, Mary Barton, that is the first novel, an important title. Another thing is that she wrote one of the novel, that is Ruth, that is asked in the exam. Another title which is asked in the exam is the biography of life of Charlotte Bronte, which is known as the biography of Charlotte Bronte. So that is asked also in exam, that who wrote the life of Charlotte Bronte, that is Elizabeth Gaskell. તમને મનનો પ્રશ્ન થતો હશે કે કેટલા બધા વર્ક છે, ઘણા બધા વર્ક છે, યાદ રાખવા પડશે, એમાં જે છે ડિટેલમાં જવું પડશે. તો generally you can find that those texts which are considered classic, for example Dickens, generally prescribed in the syllabus of BA or MA unit. Then you have Hardy's some novels, then Emily Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, then you have George Eliot. That is, these are the writers who are generally prescribed in the syllabus. So you have to focus on only those writers. Otherwise, Elizabeth Gaskell, you have to remember the titles and the if you can remember the publication year, then that is good for you. Just remember like that the life of Charlotte Bronte, that is asked in the exam 1857. Then you have the first novel Mary Breton, A Tale of Manchester Life, that is also asked. Okay, so try to remember the titles in the case of minor writers of this period. Another important writer who is particularly famous because he was born in Kolkata, and generally it is asked in the exam. There was one question. There are some writers like you have this man William Makepeace Thackeray, then you have Rudyard Kipling, then you have the writer George Orwell, and there is one writer, English writer. For example, you can take any name, like you can say that Dryden. તો તમને આ રીતે પ્રશ્ન પૂછાય છે કે ફાઇન્ડ આઉટ ધી ઓડ વન. તો ફાઇન્ડ આઉટ ધી ઓડ વન, તો આ બધા જે ત્રણ મેં રાઇટર્સ બતાવ્યા, રૂડિયાર્ડ કિપલિંગ છે, પછી વિલિયમ મેકપીસ ટેકરે છે, જ્યોર્જ ઓરવેલ છે, દે આર બોર્ન ઇન ઇન્ડિયા. ફોર એક્ઝામ્પલ, રૂડિયાર્ડ કિપલિંગ બોર્ન ઇન બોમ્બે, વિલિયમ મેકપીસ ટેકરે બોર્ન ઇન કલકત્તા, ધેન જ્યોર્જ ઓરવેલ બોર્ન ઇન મોતીહારી, બિહાર. તો આવા પ્રશ્નો પૂછાયા છે કારણ કે ઇન્ડિયામાં બોર્ન થયો છે એટલા માટે તમારી માટે મહત્વના રાઇટર છે. He is famous for his one novel, that is Vanity Fair, and this is generally prescribed in the syllabus of every university. You can find this novel in MA syllabus. Earlier work, particularly, you can say, let us see the photograph of William Makepeace Thackeray. This is William Makepeace Thackeray. Uh, he wrote one work, that is La Sylphide, that is not important from net point of view. Then you have particularly 1837 where he returned to London, and then you have particularly he contributed in some magazine. During this period you have one magazine, Fraser's magazine, and you have Punch. Punch is asked in the exam, that Punch is a magazine related to which period, that is Victorian period. Then you have particularly he took one pseudonym, that is Charles Champ Yellow Plus. Okay. Then you have another pseudonym, Michelangelo Tickmars, and there is the third pseudonym, that is George Savage Fitzboodle. Okay, and Thackeray, you can say that is famous for his travel books, which includes the Paris Sketchbook, the Irish Sketchbook, and Notes of a Journey from Cornwall to Grand Cairo. If you want to work particularly on a travel writing, then you can take this example in your PhD, and you can particularly focus on these three books, the Paris Sketchbook, the Irish Sketchbook, and Notes of Journey from Cornhill to Grand Cairo. Then, as I've told you, that Punch is one of the important general in his life because he wrote so many works, and even major works are published his uh, in this general called Punch. Then, in fact, you have to remember one of the important novel which is very famous, Vanity Fair, and the subtitle is asked various times in NET exam and GSET exam, a novel without a hero. A novel without a hero. When I told you about Pilgrim's Progress, at the time I told you that from this novel, the title of Vanity Fair is taken by Pilgrim's from John Bunyan's Pilgrim Progress, where you have Vanity Fair એક મેળો હોય છે જેમાં particularly એ મેળાને Vanity Fair કીધું છે because most of the peoples are hypocrite, they have some kind of vanity. તો આ જે છે વેનિટી ફેરની તમારી જોડે વાત કરેલી છે એના પરથી આ ટાઇટલ લીધેલું છે. હવે આમાં જે છે તમારી જોડે કોઈ હીરો નથી, ફોકસ છે બે હિરોઈન પર છે, એટલા માટે આનું સબટાઇટલ છે નોવેલ વિથઆઉટ અ હીરો. હવે તમારી જોડે બે હિરોઈન છે એના નામ પૂછાયેલા છે નેટ અને જીસેટ બંનેમાં. એક છે એમેલિયા અને બીજું છે બેકી શાર્પ. બેકી શાર્પ જે છે દેટ ઇઝ એન્ટી હિરોઈન. એમેલિયા ઇઝ અ ગુડ કેરેક્ટર. He is a passive character. On the other side, Becky Sharp is very talented, intelligent, but she particularly behaves like an anti-heroine of this novel. So remember this title and subtitles, and the hero particularly is not present. Of course there is hero, but the focus is on two characters. These are the two heroines. Then you have particularly the history of Pendennis, a semi-autobiographical Bildun's romance. Now, Bildun's romance is one of the important genre during this period. Bildun's romance means the focus is on particularly the growth of one man. For example, you have Great Expectation. You have the focus on one character, that is Peep. Uh, from childhood to, you can say that he become a complete man, that journey is described in this novel. So these kind of novels are known as Bildun's romance. અને તમને આવા પ્રશ્નો ઘણી વખત પૂછાયેલા છે, તમે એક્ઝામ્પલ આપી દીધા હોય જેમ કે હિસ્ટ્રી ઓફ પેનેડિસ છે, ગ્રેટ એક્સપેક્ટેશન છે, તો એ જે છે પૂછ્યું હોય કે ભાઈ આમાંથી બિલ્ડન્સ રોમન્સનું એક્ઝામ્પલ કયું છે, તો આવા પ્રશ્નો તમને નીટમાં પૂછાઈ ચૂકેલા છે ઓલરેડી, તો એ ધ્યાનમાં રાખજો. Then you have another novel that is, the title is important, that is asked in the exam, NET exam particularly, the history of Henry Esmond. The history of Henry Esmond. And this is a novel which is written in 3 volumes, and it talks about particularly reign of Queen Anne. The setting is particularly the reigning period of Queen Anne. Then he particularly lectured uh, on particularly the form of novel, and the new comes, that is another novel, The Rose and the Ring. This title is also important. The Virginians, that is a historical novel, that is a sequel to The New Comes. એન્ડ પર્ટિક્યુલરલી જે છે ટાઇટલ તમારે ધ્યાનમાં રાખવાનું છે, ડિટેલમાં જે છે તમારે વિકીપીડિયા પર સર્ચ કરવાનું છે, વેનિટી ફેર, અ નોવેલ વિથઆઉટ અ હીરો. એમેલિયા એન્ડ બેકી શાર્પ જે છે બે કેરેક્ટર જે છે યાદ રાખવાના છે. પાછળના વર્ષમાં જે છે એક નોવેલ લખી છે, દેટ ઇઝ લોવેલ ધ વિડોવર, અને એમના જે છે એસેસનું એક કલેક્શન પબ્લિશ થયું છે, રાઉન્ડ અબાઉટ પેપર્સ. જે છે છેલ્લી નોવેલ છે એડવેન્ચર ઓફ ફિલિપ, અને પર્ટિક્યુલરલી જે છે એ 1863માં ક્રિસમસ ઇવનિંગના દિવસે એમનું મૃત્યુ થાય છે. He used satire, humor in his novels, and particularly જે છે એ એક નોવેલને ટૂલ તરીકે યુઝ કરે છે સોસાયટીને સેટરાઇઝ કરવા માટે. Then you have Particularly another writer which is very famous during this period, that is Charles Dickens. Now Dickens is one of the important name. The lifespan is also asked because one of the prominent name of this period, 1812 to 1870. He was born in Portsmouth. He was a son of John Dickens, who was an irresponsible clerk who lived his life in poverty. Dickens had seen the poverty from his childhood. In fact, he worked in the factory because his father was particularly taken into prison because he was not able to uh, particularly pay his debts, and that is why at that time you have one kind of prison that is known as debts prison. જે કોઈ પૈસા લીધા હોય લોન કે એવું કંઈ લીધું હોય અને એવી જે છે લોન પૂરી ના કરી શકતા હોય એમના માટેની એક સ્પેશિયલ જેલ બનાવવામાં આવી હતી, તો એમાં એમને પૂરવામાં આવ્યા હતા જ્હોન ડિકન્સને. તો ડિકન્સ વર્ક એઝ અ ફેક્ટરી, you can say labor, in his childhood in order to fulfill the requirement of money in his family. બીજું છે તમારી જોડે કે પહેલા રાઇટર છે who this is the picture of Charles Dickens. This is the first writer who is considered when British Parliament made some laws. એમની નોવેલ છે એમને ધ્યાનમાં રાખવામાં આવી હતી. હી ઇઝ કન્સિડર એઝ ધી ફાધર ઓફ સોશિયલ નોવેલ્સ ઇન બ્રિટન. એન્ડ ઇનફેક્ટ ફેક્ટરી જે છે લોઝ જે છે એ બનાવવામાં આવ્યા હતા એમની નોવેલને ધ્યાનમાં રાખવામાં આવી હતી. સાથે સાથે ચાઇલ્ડ લેબર અને એમના જે નોવેલ છે એમાં ઓર્ફેન જે છે બાળકો એ વધારે વારંવાર રિપીટ થયેલા છે કેરેક્ટરમાં, વેધર ઇટ ઇઝ ડેવિડ કોપરફિલ્ડ, વેધર ઇટ ઇઝ ગ્રેટ એક્સપેક્ટેશન, પીપ કે પછી ઓલિવર ટ્વિસ્ટમાં ઓલિવર જે છે એ કેરેક્ટર હોય. બીજું છે તમારી જોડે particularly what happens that when he was transferred to London, he was facing some problems, mental problems. And as I've told you, that John Dickens' imprisonment for a debt at Marsalia's prison, where you can say Dickens become a factory labor. He worked in a factory, and this traumatic experience is reflected in his novels. ઓકે, એમના 12th બર્થડે પછી જે છે વોરેન્સ બ્લેકિંગ ફેક્ટરી જે છે એમાં એમને કામ કરેલું છે, અને એ જે છે જે મહિનાઓ દરમિયાન એમને કામ કરેલું છે એનું જે છે વર્ણન એમની નોવેલમાં વધારે જોવા મળે છે. બીજું છે વેન હી યુઝ ટુ પર્ટિક્યુલરલી જે છે he was one of the great novelist, but he used to beat his wife. Another thing is that one of the interesting things related to him is that he used to pass from one street where he was attracted towards one house. જે છે એક ઘર જોતા હતા, મોટો બંગલો જે હતો, અને એ વખતે જ્યારે નાના હતા ત્યારે એમનો વિચાર હતો કે ભવિષ્યમાં હું આ બંગલો ખરીદીશ. અને રિયાલિટીમાં જે છે એ પાછળ જતાં જ્યારે he becomes one of the prominent novelist, he bought this house for himself. તો એ જે છે એ સપનું એમને પૂરું કરેલું છે પોતાની લાઈફમાં. ઇનફેક્ટ he started his career as a journalist, અને જર્નાલિસ્ટમાં જે છે પર્ટિક્યુલરલી એમને અમુક વર્ક લખેલા છે. એમાં તમારી જોડે પર્ટિક્યુલરલી ધ મિરર ઓફ પાર્લામેન્ટ, જે એમના અંકલનું વર્ક હતું, એમાં એમને જે છે એડિટર તરીકે કામ કરેલું છે. પછી જે છે થોડા ન્યૂઝપેપર છે જેમાં એમને રિપોર્ટર તરીકે કામ કરેલું છે. એમાં નામ છે ફેમસ ધ ટ્રુ સન, લિબરલ પેપર, ધ મોર્નિંગ ક્રોનિકલ. ધીસ ઇઝ વન ઓફ ધ ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ ન્યૂઝપેપર ઓફ ધેટ પીરિયડ. બીજું છે મેગેઝિન છે, એમાં એમને એડિટર તરીકે કામ કરેલું છે. અને એમનું જે છે રિપોર્ટ્સ જે છે એનાથી એમની જે ફર્સ્ટ બુક આવે છે પબ્લિકેશન જે થાય છે 1836-37માં, એનું નામ છે સ્કેચીસ બાય બોઝ, સ્કેચીસ બાય બોઝ. અને આ જે છે એકચ્યુઅલી ટાઇટલ જે છે એક સ્યુડોનેમ હતું, એમને લીધું હતું બોઝ. એ તમને પૂછાયેલું છે નેટની એક્ઝામમાં, તો એ તમે ધ્યાનમાં રાખજો કે ડિફેન્સે કયા સ્યુડોનેમ સાથે નામ જે છે એક યુઝ કરેલું છે, તો એ કયું છે તો BOSES. And in fact, you can say that this is not a novel, this is a particularly experience જે છે એમના રિપોર્ટિંગના જે એક્સપિરિયન્સ છે, તો એક ફિક્શન જે છે એ કહી શકાય છે. એ એક્સપિરિયન્સ છે એ એમને જે છે એ આ બુકમાં નોંધેલા છે, સ્કેચીસ બાય બોઝમાં. અને એને આપણે એમનું ફર્સ્ટ વર્ક કહી શકીએ છીએ, નોવેલ નથી કહેતા એમને, બરાબર. Then he particularly fell in love with Maria Bednan, who was particularly working with him. અને આગળ જતા જે છે એમને થોડા પબ્લિકેશન જે છે મેં તમને કીધા એ કર્યા છે. પછી જે છે ડિકન્સનું ફોકસ જે છે એ નોવેલ ઉપર આવે છે, અને પહેલી જે નોવેલ એમની પબ્લિશ થાય છે દેટ ઇઝ ધ પિકવિક પેપર્સ, બેટર નોન એઝ જે છે આખું નામ તો એનું છે ધ પોસ્ટમ્યુઅસ પેપર્સ ઓફ ધ પિકવિક ક્લબ, બટ ટૂંકમાં જેને આપણે પિકવિક પેપર્સ કહીએ છીએ. તો એ જે છે એમની કરિયરની ફર્સ્ટ નોવેલ જે છે આપણે કહી શકાય છે. That is published in the same year, Sketches by Bose, 1836. Subtitle is The Posthumous Paper of Pickwick Club. દરેક નોવેલમાં લગભગ તમે સબટાઇટલ જોશો ડિકન્સની નોવેલમાં. તમને કેરેક્ટર એક પૂછાયું છે સેમ્યુઅલ પિકવિક નોવેલનું, તો એ તમારે ધ્યાનમાં રાખવાનું છે, બાકી ડિટેલમાં જવાની જરૂર નથી. ફક્ત જે છે સેમ્યુઅલ પિકવિક જે છે મેચ A અને Bમાં પૂછાઈ ચૂકેલું છે. This is the copy, the original cover page of 1836 edition, posthumous paper, Pickwick Club by Dickens. Then you have, particularly after this, you have Bose Peach. That is one of the work which came after Pickwick paper. Then you have Oliver Twist and Nicholas Nickleby. નીટ અને જીસેટ બંનેમાં જે છે ક્રોનોલોજી એમના વર્કની વારંવાર પૂછાયેલી છે, તો એ પોઈન્ટ ઓફ વ્યૂથી તમારે ડિકન્સના જે વર્ક છે ધ્યાનમાં રાખવાના છે કે સ્કેચીસ બાય બોઝ, એના પછી પિકવિક પેપર પછી તમારી જોડે જે છે પર્ટિક્યુલરલી ઓલિવર ટ્વિસ્ટ, નિકોલસ નિકલબાય, આ જે છે એ વર્ક યાદ રાખવાના છે. Then you have one novel that is Master Humphrey's Clock. Then particularly આના પછી જે છે ડિકન્સ took a visit of બોસ્ટન, અમેરિકાની વિઝિટ કરેલી હતી, અને he was you can say enthusiastically welcomed by the American people. In fact, he became very famous in this time. બે નોવેલિસ્ટ જે છે એ અમેરિકામાં બહુ ફેમસ થઈ ગયા હતા આ સમય દરમિયાન. એક છે તમારી જોડે હાર્ડી અને ડિકન્સ. ઇનફેક્ટ હાર્ડીના કેસમાં તો એવું હતું કે હાર્ડી જ્યારે બંદર ઉપર ઉતર્યા ત્યારે આખું એક ટોળું જે છે એમને જોવા માટે ભેગું થયેલું હતું. હાર્ડી વોઝ સરપ્રાઈઝ કે આ કોને મળવા આવે છે એવો પ્રશ્ન પૂછ્યો, ત્યારે જે છે જવાબ આવ્યો કે ભાઈ ધીસ આર ધ પીપલ હુ વોન્ટ્સ ટુ સી યુ, મતલબ કે તમને જોવા માટે આવ્યા છે. So Hardy was quite surprised because Hardy's novel, you can say, criticized in England, but most of the novels were very popular in America at that time. And Dickens also uh, got some kind of popularity, same kind of popularity in America. During this visit, he visited America, then he particularly visited Italy. અને એના પછીની જે નોવેલ છે એ જે છે આપણી જોડે ઇમ્પોર્ટન્સ બની રહે છે, જેની આપણે ચર્ચા જે છે પર્ટિક્યુલરલી નેક્સ્ટ લેક્ચરમાં કરીશું. Okay, so I hope that you have understood particularly the important genres of this period, the some you can say genres like detective novels, sensation novels, silver fox fiction. Then you have Newgate novel, or you can say Newgate prison novel. Then some autobiographies are also published in this period. Then some trends, literary trends like Oxford movement, then utilitarianism, then you have positivism, Darwinism. આ જે છે બધી તમે વાત કરી એ જે છે તમને ખબર પડી હશે. તમારે જો કોઈ પ્રશ્ન હોય તો તમે પૂછી શકો છો. જે છે આઈ વોન્ટ ટુ ટોક, બટ ઇટ ઇઝ વેરી ડિફિકલ્ટ ફોર મી કે એક ધારું જે છે 1 કલાક બોલતું રહેવું. મતલબ ઓનલાઈન ક્લાસમાં દેટ ઇઝ નોટ પોસિબલ. આઈ ફીલ દેટ આઈ એમ ટાયર્ડ આફ્ટર 1 hour. સો આઈ વોન્ટ ટુ કન્ટિન્યુ બટ સમહાઉ ઇટ ઇઝ નોટ પોસિબલ ફોર મી. જે છે તમારે એ ધ્યાનમાં રાખવાનું. જે છે પર્ટિક્યુલરલી મેં વર્ક કીધા છે એ તમે ધ્યાનમાં રાખજો. અને જેમ કે આપણે આમાં ચર્ચા કરી, you have one of the important novelists, that is you have વિલિયમ મેકપીસ થેકરે. તો વેનિટી ફેર જે છે એ જે છે વર્ક વારંવાર નેટમાં પૂછાયું છે. ટાઇટલ છે હીરો, હિરોઈનના 2 નામ છે, નોવેલ વિથઆઉટ હીરો. તો એવા જે છે વર્કને તમે વિકીપીડિયા પર સર્ચ કરજો. બાકીના જે વર્કનું ટાઇટલ જે છે એનાથી કામ જે છે ઇઝી રહેશે ફોર નેટ. સમટાઈમ્સ for GSET, sometimes in NET particularly, uh, the history of Henry Osborn, this kind of works are not prescribed in the syllabus of university, but that is considered as masterpiece. તો આવા વર્ક છે એ ડિટેલમાં પૂછાયેલા છે. પછી મેં તમને કીધું કે મેગેઝિન છે, પંચ છે, એવા વર્ક પણ પૂછાયેલા છે. તો તમારે એ જે છે ને નેટના પોઈન્ટ ઓફ વ્યૂથી જે છે તમે તૈયારી કરો. હાલ તમારું ફોકસ છે જીસેટ હોવું જોઈએ, બિકોઝ you have only 1 month. So the first target should be that you have to complete the syllabus up to the from Anglo-Saxon to postmodern, criticism, American literature, Indian literature. And these are the 4 you can say major areas which you have to cover. Then you can particularly in GSET point of view, you can ignore linguistic, you can ignore cultural study, you can ignore world literature. બટ હજુ સુધી તમારી જોડે નેટની ડેટ આવી નથી. તો નેટ જે છે એમાં તમારી જોડે તમને હવે તો લગભગ આવશે. તો that will fall in the month of January. So you will have extra 2 month જે છે નવેમ્બર પછી તમને મળશે. તો એમાં તમે એ વસ્તુ જે બાકી રહી જાય છે કવર કરો. ફર્સ્ટ ટાર્ગેટ શુડ બી જીસેટ, અને એમાં તમારી જોડે ટાઇટલ જે છે એનાથી તમારું કામ થઈ જશે. ઓકે, સો ડુ યુ હેવ એની ક્વેશ્ચન? If you have, then you can ask me. Any question from your side? Okay, so yes, I think I have not described one term, that is silver folk fiction. Silver folk fiction જે છે એને particularly silver folk fiction કહેવામાં આવે છે. that is સિલ્વર ફોર્ક, આપણે જે છે ચમચી જે સિલ્વર ફોર્ક કહીએ છીએ એ. તો સિલ્વર ફોર્ક ફિક્શન દેટ ઇઝ પર્ટિક્યુલરલી ફોકસ ઓન ધ ફેશનેબલ લાઈફ, ધી મેનર્સ, ધી સ્ટાઇલ ઓફ જેન્ટલમેન. જે કોન્સેપ્ટ છે તમારી જોડે એક ડિકન્સની નોવેલમાં છે, ધ કોન્સેપ્ટ ઓફ જેન્ટલમેન, વિચ ઇઝ ક્રિટિસાઇઝ બાય ડિકન્સ ઇન ધી નોવેલ કોલ્ડ ગ્રેટ એક્સપેક્ટેશન. તો એને આપણે સિલ્વર ફોક ફિક્શન કહીએ છીએ. બાકી આઈ થિંક પોઝિટિવિઝમ, યુટિલિટેરિયનિઝમ, એસ્થેટિઝમ, ડાર્વિનિઝમ એ બધાની આપણે ચર્ચા કરી ચૂક્યા છે. ઓકે, સો વી વિલ મીટ ટુમોરો એન્ડ વી વિલ continue our discussion on novel, and the focus would be Charles Dickens. Thank you.